So today we are, in a larger sense, today we are talking a lot about positioning strategy, business success. And in that context, I want to shed some light on the role culture can have as a hard factor. And I want to start with a famous quote of the late Peter Drucker: "Culture eats strategy for breakfast." And what Peter Drucker wanted to point at was that actually culture is what we say the hidden success factor for strategy implementation. And that is the first thesis out of three I want to present to you and to discuss later in some depth. The second one is culture is a hard, economically relevant success factor and not a nice to have. And the third one is that culture can be shaped and be aligned to a firm's strategy. Now let's expand a little bit on the three theses. So the first one, culture is the hidden success factor for strategy and strategy implementation. And first, perhaps then, what is culture? Culture is the way we do things here around, or in a more sophisticated way, culture is the sum of all the accepted behaviors within a firm. Those are two definitions used in scientific circles. And if we ask the question, why are so many initiatives, mergers, etc., not living up to the expected results, it is helpful to start and to have a look at the iceberg model. Yes, and what we see above the waterline, what we call the surface structure, are concepts, strategy papers, everything which is cognitive. And if we then look below the waterline, what we call the deep structure, we have a very different breed. What we see there, that's thoughts, emotions, assumptions, values, identity, mental models, needs, etc. And the truth of the matter is that actually our behaviors are driven by what is below the waterline, by the deep structure. And if there is no alignment, then it's no wonder that everything is above the waterline is not going to happen. And if we think about a new strategy normally implies that we do things differently, and not totally differently, but in certain aspects, in certain areas. And that pits the strategy automatically against the current culture. And people don't change just because of a piece of paper called strategy or because of a partnership decision. So the result is that if there is no alignment, that there is a huge risk that culture can become a major roadblock for the implementation of a strategy or whichever strategic initiative. So to make that strategic initiative or the implementation of it a success, it is necessary to understand the gaps between the current culture and the current and the future behaviors which are required for a successful implementation of the strategy. And if we approach culture from that angle, it becomes clear that culture is a hidden key success factor for the success of whichever strategy a firm wants to implement. So if we then go to the second thesis, culture is a hard, economically relevant success factor, we can build on research that shows that there's a direct link between culture and economic success. And there are several scientific studies showing that various dimensions have a impact on this economic success, on the financial success, to the point that the research says more than 30% of the financial success, of the economic success, relates to culture. And out of various cultural dimensions, 6 have a direct high impact on financial success, which are corporate social responsibility, growth opportunities, care for people, identification, job involvement, job satisfaction. Third and final thesis, culture can be shaped and be aligned to a firm's new strategy. We call this cultural backward reengineering based on an assessment of the current culture, the status quo, if you want to, and then a 4-step process. The first step is to define the behaviors needed to implement the new strategy. And in the second step, identify the values, and by that, the cultural dimensions linked to those values behind those behaviors. Thirdly, to calculate the gap between today's status quo and the future culture. And based on the results, that's the 4th step, to take a very targeted action plan on the specific cultural dimensions behind each value. This process allows actually, in a very focused way, to make the current culture evolve towards the desired future culture. And my 5 minutes are up, and I hope I was able to show that culture is not a nice to have, but quite an important success factor, having impact on the hardest dimension of professional service firms, their profitability. Thank you.